This is a video on how to shoot an HDRI with this camera. This is the Insta360 One RS 1-inch edition. It's brand new, this camera. I have opened it already and I have updated the firmware, but I haven't shot any pictures with it. Hopefully it's still charged. I did that a couple weeks ago. This is the camera here. Plastic thingy still on it. I'm going to take those off of the lens. Very satisfying. But yeah, I guess. In the box is a little section down here. So here's what you get. You get a cleaning cloth. This is a lens cleaning cloth, which I'll open here. You get a cable to connect it to a computer, USB-C cable, and in here you get a rubber hood. And this is to protect the lenses. So if I get the camera and it's exposed, you just sit that on top of there. And it keeps the lenses from getting scratched and damaged when you put it down on a table, for example. You also get this little tiny plastic thing that we don't want to lose. So we'll leave that in the box and try not to lose it. Now when this cap is on, it doesn't really sit in the box very nice, and I don't have a case for this. Maybe at some later point I will get a case, but what I have been doing is I've been placing the cleaning cloth here at the bottom, taking off the rubber hood, and resting it gently in there like so. And then putting the top of the box on. Shoop. That's how I'm storing it. Don't scratch this. Protect this at all costs. Don't let it fall over or rub around on the concrete, because that will ruin it forever. Now this camera here has just 2 buttons on the side. There are some other things that look like buttons that are to take it apart. You should have no need to take it apart. It's kind of a hassle to take it apart, and I wouldn't recommend it. This top button is the power button. That one there, power. Push it on with a long press, and you'll hear a sound, and it will start up. And looking at the battery, we have probably enough battery for the demo. You can see that there. Now because this camera has never been used, I think when I hit it, when I touch it, it will start to give me the walkthrough on how to use the camera. So the first thing that it tells you is double click to view the panorama preview. Now if your camera's been used by somebody, you won't get this little pop-up. But this is like instructions, and then to get on to the next set of instructions, you do what it says. Double click, and now you can move the panorama around. So it's a live view, a live 360 view on this touchscreen. The next thing it's going to show you, we'll hit this arrow to go back. The little arrow goes back to just regular menu view. And when I touch it again, I think I get another pop-up, right? No. Maybe when I swipe I get a pop-up. Nope. Maybe because I updated the firmware I won't get those pop-ups. I'll explain what those pop-ups would do. When you swipe down, you get this menu. This is sort of like the settings menu, I think they call it. And it's got a bunch of icons here that we don't really need. You can touch them to see what they do. This will make the screen brighter or darker. And then you swipe up, I believe, to get back, or maybe you click. No, you click to get back. The next one will lock the rotation. This one will turn the recording light on and off. This one, automatic screen rotation, is now on, and it's got 2 pages. You can see there's 2 little dots there indicating 2 pages. If we go to the next page, there's one voice command so that you can voice activate the thing. And then there's another one for, it's called quick capture. I'm not sure what that is. Click the shutter button to power on and start recording. So quick capture means the power will start capturing right away. So I confirm that and turn it off. I don't want that. Now the gear icon, you may need this. If you touch it once, up in the top, the very top one is general. When you click general, there's a USB mode. And when you're done shooting your pictures and you want to offload onto your computer, you'll want this to be in disk mode. So I click into it, the top one is disk mode. That's the mode I'll need to unload my camera. Clicking these little arrows takes you back. Down at the bottom of the settings menu, there's a camera info button, which will give you the serial number. The serial number is also available on the bottom of your box. You will need that to download the software. Two more things that I'm going to show here. Swipe down for the main settings menu. Under the gear icon, there's an option for General. Under General, Reset Guide will give you the walkthrough menus again. You just say confirm, and now when you click anything, you'll get the walkthrough of all of the buttons and how to operate the camera. So that's one thing. And the other is under SD card in this same menu, SD card. Click into that. This is where you can format the card. So it's never a terrible idea to format the card as soon as you get it. Get rid of whatever was on there. If you borrowed the camera from your friend or someone else, just format the card and hit confirm, and it will clean your card ready for you. You don't have to filter other people's images. All right, going back to the main menu. So when I'm done with this, I can swipe up and it goes away. Now there's a left swipe and a right swipe. Both of these do different things. When I swipe to the left, swiping this way, it will give me settings. When I swipe that way, it will give me modes. So first you go to a mode. There's picture, photo, HDR photo, etc. A whole bunch of modes. For our HDRI, we want the mode called HDR photo. There's actually two ways to do this. I'll show you both ways. I'll show you the easy way first. So the easy way is you go to HDR photo. You click it. Now I'm in HDR photo mode. Now when I swipe this way, when I swipe like this, you get the settings for HDR photo mode. And there are items at the bottom that you can scroll, and then the settings for that item at the top. So the first one is pure shot. So the pure shot or just JPEGs, those are the choices. So we picked pure shot, and I think this is what gives us the DNGs, which is what we want. The next item, scrolling over, is the number of bracketed photos that it will shoot. I'm going to pick the maximum number, 9, the maximum number of bracketed photos. The next item is how many stops of exposure each bracket step will show you. I'm going to pick the largest number, which is 1. 1 stop in between each exposure. And the last item is the white balance. So I don't recommend auto because you may get a different white balance on each sensor, which is a little risky. So I recommend you just use the picture and find a number that makes your picture look natural and balanced, particularly in a mixed lighting environment. So here, let me take a quick look here and see what looks nice and whitish. Yeah, I'll pick 6,000 Kelvin for my white balance. And that's it. Those are the settings for the easy mode. And then when you click out of this, it shows you information about what it's going to shoot. 21 megapixel image. So the next step is to put this onto a tripod. I have a tripod here, handy little tripod. And you do this so it doesn't fall over. So I'll just stick this on here real quick, like. And then I'll hit the button and I'll get an exposure range. Now the sun is shining brightly through some clouds right now. I click the button to record and I just wait until it finishes. The sun will get covered potentially during the time that my exposures are going, if the clouds are moving fast in particular. But hopefully it's not doing that. I should have recorded this facing the other way. Maybe I'll make another set. Yeah. So I've ruined that set, and I'll just wait for it to finish and make another go so I can see the back of the camera. So here it is finished. I'm going to make another one and call that one a burn. I'll click the button again, and now it's capturing, and I can see that on the back of here. It says capturing, keep the camera still, and now it's saving. Most of the time it's writing a file, so it's writing two files. One of them is a JPEG, one of them is a DNG, which is a RAW file. And there it is, it's done. So once again, that's the HDR mode. Now, one of the disadvantages of this mode is you can't tell it to, you don't have control over where the exposure range starts. It picks an optimal exposure, and then it exposes on either side of those to create your 9 bracketed photos. Now, on a sunny day like this, with the sun, or maybe this isn't that sunny, this is kind of cloudy, but if your sun is very bright and beaming in your image, you want the fastest shutter speed possible to reduce clipping in that sun. So I'm going to now show you the manual mode, which will help you guarantee that you get an appropriate exposure. So I'm going to swipe this way to get my modes. Make sure this is showing. And I'm going to go to photo mode. So there I am in photo mode. I click into it, and I swipe this way to get the settings. Now this, and then I'm going to put it into manual, and I'm going to control the shutter speed with these options. That's how manual mode works. But what I'm going to do instead of using this touchscreen interface is I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to use my phone. Now I got my phone, and I'm going to open this app. So what we're looking for is the Insta360 app, which is this one here, Get. Yep, so I'm installing that now on this phone here. That's the app you want. Alright, opening the app. My camera's still on. And it's found the camera, and then you connect. Connection must be confirmed on the device for the first time only. I'm going to confirm. Join the network, yes. And there we go. We can instantly see the pictures, and if we click the camera, we get a live view of what's on the camera. So there's our live view. There's me. And then now we're going to change the settings in here. We're going to go to photo mode and do our manual photo mode, because we want to try and capture all the energy from the sun. So right now, I'm going to scroll over here. Right now the sun is going to pop out of there, and I would like to capture all that energy. So I go into the manual settings. I make sure this goes from auto to manual, and then I'm going to change the shutter speed to be the very fastest shutter speed possible. And then I'm going to manually step through all these exposures. I forgot an important step. You want to make sure, click up here, and either pick Pure Shot or JPEG and RAW. I think they will both give DNGs. Low battery, 20%, got it. So we better do this fast. Now we will go to manual again, and move this 2 sliders over and do half of that speed. No, twice that speed. And we'll just shoot a bunch of photos until it gets too bright. Each time going 2 steps, or from 5,000, not 2 steps, but each time we're halving or doubling the speed. So this is twice as long, this exposure. We'll do that again, twice as long. So now we're at, we were at 2,500, so that'll be 1,250. Manual. We'll skip a little bit and go to 5,000. Sorry, 1/500. We'll skip a little bit, 1/240. One over 120. This should also be at the lowest ISO, so that'll give you the least amount of noise. So my lowest ISO here is 100, and that's what I put. And again, I forgot to set the white balance, and I left it on auto, which is not ideal. I'll just shoot one more of these because I think this should be enough. So looking around here at the image, I want to make sure all of the darkest areas of my image are exposed. I think I can maybe do one more. I'll do one more stop, 1/30th of a second, and that should be all I need. So again, this is the manual mode, and the reason that we're doing this is so that we can shoot at the very fastest shutter speed, 1/8,000. So that's a very fast shutter speed, which should make the sun as small as possible for this camera. So we don't have any way to put an ND filter on this camera, so we may still get clipping in the sun, but we'll get as much sun energy as possible. That's why we would use the manual mode. If we were just indoors and we had a very controlled lighting situation, the faster, the other mode where we're just going to use HDR, hit the button once and get all these exposures, that might be the best way to capture an interior. So that's it. So now you can see your photos on here if you click over to this icon. Sorry, maybe that's not the one. I thought there was a view on this that showed me all of my photos on here. Yeah, this is the one. So we exited out of that, and now we have the view of all the photos that I took just now, including the first one, and then the bracketed photos that I shot just now. And at the fastest shutter speed, we still have kind of a blob for the sun. So ideally, we would be able to put an ND filter on this and get the sun down to just a tiny little speck, but this is as dark as we could go. So we'll look at these on the computer next. So now we're done with the camera demo. The rest of this, I'm going to plug the camera into the computer. Now, I'm going to switch back to this camera view, and I'm going to make sure I swipe down, go to the second page and the gear icon, and under General, we want USB mode to be set to disk, USB disk. And that means when I plug in a cable, when I plug in one of these cables, it will just connect to my computer. So where you plug in the cable is here on the side. There's a little window, a little flap. You pull at the bottom, and the flap opens, and then you plug in your USB-C there, and it should just mount on the computer. Switching over to the desktop now, and you'll see the place to get the software is here, Insta360. Our camera, we can see the picture right here. Click into that, and we want to download Insta360 Studio. When you click the button, it will ask for a serial number. Now the serial number can be found on the back of the box here. That's pretty overexposed. There you go, back of the box, right there, or inside of the camera under Settings General. I've already done this, so I'm not going to go through that step. I'll minimize this and just launch the software. There's a splash screen happening on my other screen. Now, import automatically, and I got these two pop-ups. This one would let me update the version. I'm going to just leave this one here and update it another time. I don't need it. Import automatically, I'm going to pick Select Files or Later and just navigate to this. I'll select Files. And what it's done is it's given me all of the files on my Insta360 camera. Because it's mounted it here, it's just showing me that in an Explorer. This looks like the photos that I just took, so I'm going to stick with those. And I'm going to copy them locally. I'm going to make another Explorer window. I'm going to go here to Local Files, Temp, Testing IBLs, make a new folder here. Friday morning, and I'll put my images, I'll drag and drop all of these in here. So let's just do this quickly. So this will copy all of those images off of the SD card, so I don't need that anymore. I just want to use these, and I'm going to drag and drop these into here. Now, I'll go back to that window that we saw a second ago, and I'll point out a few things. What we have are two file types. One of them is a DNG file type, and the other is an INSP file type. This is actually a JPEG file, and if you were to rename this to a JPG, it will just open in any JPEG viewer. This is just a JPEG file with some custom metadata. And they've changed the extension so it's recognizable by their app. That's all that is. Now, when I dragged all those in there, I see less items in this list than I see in this list. And the reason is, this software is going to try and make your HDRIs merged into a single item in this list. So it's a little bit confusing here, but this is the first sequence that I took. This is the second sequence that I took when I used the HDR function. This is the DNG, and you can see that here. And this is the INSP file, which is a JPEG. We don't need these. We only need these. And this first one, you may recall, was a bit of a mistake. I moved the camera, so I'm just going to delete that, and we'll just look at this DNG. This was the first HDRI that I took that was where I didn't move the camera around. So this is the first good one. Down at the bottom of the view here, you can see all of the exposures that I have, and this one is like a tone-mapped merge exposure, and you can see it just changed. And this is what many photographers are looking for when they make an HDRI. They're not looking for what we want. We want to make an HDRI that has 32 bits of depth, that is the full range of light that this camera is able to capture. And we're going to use this for lighting CG objects, right? So we want something different than most photographers. They just want a single image that looks cool. And this is the software trying to do that automatically. So this we can safely ignore. We're not gonna use that. We want these individual exposures. And so these are all of the range of exposures that we shot with our camera. 9 images. And the order of these images is, the first one is the metered exposure, and the other ones, this is the brightest at one end and the darkest at the other end. So I'm going to unclick those and go back to this one that I just said we don't want. We're going to use this selection to export all of these at once. You export, we don't need to do any editing here. This has already been stitched. And what we want to do is just export the DNG files stitched and ready to use in our next step. Just to point out a few other things, if your view doesn't look like this, you can change your view with this button here. Shows you different kind of view types. We're looking at, I think they call it the natural view. This one maybe? I don't see this icon anywhere. But the fisheye view is slightly warped. Maybe that's what we're looking at, the fisheye view. You can move in and out with the zooming. You can move in and out with the scroll wheel. You can do a tiny planet view, which is pretty interesting and weird. You can do a crystal ball view, which is also interesting and weird. And then here's what they call a natural view, which undistorts your lines and tries to give you a natural looking camera view. I'm going to stay on fisheye, and we'll just export these pictures. That's all we need to do here. So I have this selection, and down here I have this selected. So there's a little line around here. That's what we want. And when I click this, I get an export options window. So the default is to export a pure shot or merged HDRI that is tone mapped automatically by AI, they say. We don't want that. This would be a single merged JPEG image. What we want is to export not a reframed merged image. We want to export a 360 photo that is all exposures, all of the DNGs. We don't want either of these options. We want all of these exposures, not the merged result. I'm going to change this to the folder I just made in temp, temp, Friday testing, and then Friday morning. I'll select that, and I'll start an export. And if I go over to Friday morning, it's just created this folder. Inside of that folder, it's going to put all 9 of our images that are down here at the bottom of this UI. So it's writing out all 9 of these. And this is what we'll use in Photoshop. I'll go back up one and move that aside. And now we're going to go back to the computer view of the files that we copied. So that's the HDR method. This here is the manual method where I exposed all the things. And I could show you some of the difference here, hopefully. I don't know if I was able to capture this. I was hoping the sun might be visible here. And in one example, our fastest exposure will be brighter than the other. Well, it looks like they're both the same. So this is our fastest exposure here. And this is our fastest exposure here. And they both look to be about 8,000. Let's check this one. I'm going to go back here. So when I look at this HDRI and I select my fastest exposure and I look at the I tab, I see that it's shot at 1/8,000. And if I look at the manual mode, I know that I shot this one at 1/8,000. So it will be the same result. I don't think there was any advantage in this example by going with the manual mode, because in both cases we've shot at the fastest ISO and the fastest shutter speed. So no advantage. But in some cases I have seen an advantage where the automatic mode did not shoot at the fastest exposure, and I was able to capture a little more light with the manual mode. If we wanted to export these, we would select all the DNGs that we shot. And we would export them with this button. I'm going to export a 360 photo at the original resolution, and I'm going to put them in a new folder called Manual. With those options. It will make an annoying noise after each export. I also didn't put it in my folder. So looking in my folder here, I don't see anything, which means it's put them here. I'll sort those. There, they're all done. Now I'll try and put them in the folder. So those are all my manual ones, and as mentioned, I don't need the JPEGs. You could just straight up delete these. We're only going to use the DNGs. The DNGs contain more image information than the JPEGs. So now we're done with this software. We don't have any reason to use it. And what it has done, maybe this is important. I'll point this out. It may not be apparent what this software has done, but if we look at the original images, this is a DNG and it will open in Lightroom. Or maybe it'll open in Photos. Let's try that. Let's try Photos first because it'll be faster to launch than Lightroom. So when we look at this photo, what you get is two spherical fisheyes from each side of the camera. And this software here takes those two spherical fisheyes and stitches them together to make one spherical picture. And when you write that out to disk in the step that we just did a second ago, what you get is what they call a lat long image. It's been unwrapped into a rectangle. Now our next step, we're going to merge these together. And we'll do that with Photoshop. You can also do this with a software called PTGUI. But PTGUI is not free. It's a paid software, as is Photoshop. I'm still looking for a free way to do this, a software that will do this for free. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go to Automate, Merge to HDR Pro. And when you click that, it asks you to find some files. Now you can go back to your browser, your file thingy, your Explorer, select your files, drag and drop, works, or you can click the Browse button and navigate to it. Well, maybe drag and drop doesn't work. I thought it did. Click. Nope. Maybe only browse. So we'll copy this path. Copy. Paste. There's our images. We'll select them all. And we'll hit OK. And what it will do is it will load the pictures one after the other into a separate layer. That's what's happening there. Makes separate layers for all these things. Takes a moment. After it has loaded all of these pictures, it then runs another sort of a script that brings up a window which will be used to merge these photos together. And similar to before, many photographers who are doing this same operation have done this to make one single artful image, which is different than what we're after. So you may think that an option is to write this at a lower bit depth and do a tone mapping of this image. But that's not what we're going to do. We want to make sure this is set to 32-bit and this is not toggled on. So if this is toggled on, it will try and make that same kind of tone-mapped, merged version that the other software is trying to do. We don't want that. We don't want a tone-mapped image. We want a 32-bit image. So this is the tone mapping option, and you don't want that option. You want a full 32-bit image, and optionally you can remove ghosts. So ghosts are things like this, where I moved around, and it will try and reduce that. That's optional. You don't need that. It doesn't really matter much. This slider here controls what range of exposure we're going to display. So this is the full range. Each one of these is a stop, and there's, I don't know how many stops here. There's about 16 stops of exposure here, and our image is nicely peaking in the middle of that whole range. And this slider will show you which part of that you want to view. So if we view this part, we can see the clouds very well. If we view this part, we can see the shadows very well. It's impossible to see both the shadows and the highlights because we're viewing this on an 8-bit. We're viewing just a slice of all of this data. So we've captured all of this data and we want to view just a slice. So we'll pick one, about there. It doesn't really matter too much because all of the data is going to be in our image. You hit OK, and then another pop-up comes up, merge to HDRI, and you'll get an image in Photoshop that is at 32 bits, the full range of bit depth that Photoshop can handle. And this is what we want. And there we go. That's what we have here. And if we look under type, image, and go to mode, you'll see we have 32 bits per channel. So that's important. You can also see if we put an exposure controller here that we can look at that same range of values, and it looks like it's blooming out. This is actually going to work very well for an HDRI. Okay? So all this stuff here, we can delete that. We don't need that anymore. No, this whole thing, we want to delete that layer. And now we're just going to save our image. We go to Save As, and we choose Radiance File. We can either choose a Radiance file, which ends in HDR. That's the first choice. Or we can choose an EXR. Both of these options will store a 32-bit file that can be read by Blender. So we're going to choose HDR for the file type, and you can give this a better name. So that's it. That's the end of the process. Now you've got yourself an HDR that you can use in Blender to illuminate some CG objects that are right here in this same environment. That's all for now. Thanks. Bye.